This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good afternoon. Thanks for checking in. Assisted suicide on the move in the Empire State. For more than a decade, New York lawmakers have been trying to pass a medical aid in dying law, and this year they're trying again. Last night, the State Assembly rubber-stamped the bill that gives the terminally ill the right to kill themselves with assistance from a doctor. Pro-life groups argue state-sanctioned suicide is a slippery slope that devalues life and can lead to elder abuse. Power problems in Pennsylvania. Last night's storms causing significant damage in the Keystone State.
There's trees down everywhere.
Reporter Megan Shin.
Near Pittsburgh, large trees fell onto homes after wind gusts up to 80 miles an hour ripped across parts of western Pennsylvania.
We'll have more on the storm and its aftermath later in the broadcast. New numbers on the economy, and they are not good. The economy shrank 0.3% from January through March. That is the first drop in 3 years. 2 consecutive quarterly drops in the GDP is largely considered a recession. At a raucous rally last night in Michigan, President Trump touted the accomplishments of his first 100 days.
We've just gotten started. You haven't even seen anything yet. It's all just kicking in.
Speaking at a community college near Detroit, Mr. Trump tackled the culture wars, highlighting efforts to end what he called transgender insanity.
And I made it the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders, male and female.
The president predicted his new tariffs will pay off eventually for U.S. consumers. He's hosting top business leaders at the White House today. Many are concerned about the impact the tariffs will have on their bottom line. Some analysts fear these tariffs could lead to supply problems.
Inventory on hand right now in the United States will last for about 6 to 8 weeks. After that, shelves will be bare. We won't be able to buy as much online.
Gene Soroka runs the Port of Los Angeles, the busiest port in the Western Hemisphere.
In 2 weeks' time, we'll see a drop on our import side of the business by about a third.
He fears almost half the production at the Port of L.A. could disappear in the next few weeks. The White House hopes to make tips non-taxable. Here's business analyst Andres Gutierrez.
Right now, there are employers across the country that if you're a tip worker, they can pay you as low as $2.13 with the hope that you're going to make enough money with tips to make up the rest of your income.
The president wants Congress to establish a new tips law rather than do it through executive order. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has just suspended a Milwaukee judge. That judge is accused of helping an illegal immigrant avoid arrest. Police say the judge shielded the migrant in her courtroom when ICE agents tried to take him into custody. Saigon fell 50 years ago today.
For most of those who wanted to leave their country, this would be their last chance.
That event closed the curtain on the long and tumultuous Vietnam War. Here's how Dan Rather covered the fall of Saigon on the CBS Evening News, April 30th, 1975.
South Vietnam now is under communist control. Communist tanks smashed through the heavy gates of the presidential palace. The surrender came just 4 hours after the last Americans were pulled out of Saigon.
The South Vietnamese capital, now called Ho Chi Minh City, was captured by North Vietnam's Communist Army after the American military evacuated the U.S. Embassy. And what a catch last night in Toronto.
High fly ball center field. Varsho's back. He falls down. Oh, my goodness, did he just do that?
Blue Jays outfielder Dalton Varsho fell down and rolled over before making a backhanded catch in a game against Boston.
Wow! A circus catch if you have ever seen one.
Oh, my God.
That was ridiculous.
You have to see it to believe it. Varsho tripped at the warning track before sticking his glove out at the last second and catching the ball just inches from the ground. We'll have more in sports with Randy on the way. Also ahead on the Noon Report, Real ID Rush is on, storm damage recap, and the 2025 National Teacher of the Year. It's a teacher from Central Pennsylvania.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. It certainly is much cooler this afternoon compared to yesterday at this time. It's also a whole lot calmer. I'll have forecast details coming up in 10.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you then. Recapping our top story Wednesday, April 30th, the New York Assembly has passed a medical aid in dying bill. It allows the terminally ill to kill themselves with the help of a doctor. New York has tried for over a decade to approve a physician-assisted suicide law. That measure now heads to the Senate for consideration. Folks across New York and Pennsylvania are still cleaning up from last night's storms. The village of Warsaw in western New York got hit especially hard. Laura DeBatz tells WIVB it was raining cats and dogs, as they say.
I could tell from all of the plant life in the middle of the road that just budded that it definitely came down hard.
Warsaw resident Michael Schmidt says golf ball-sized hail made it look like it was snowing outside.
I've never experienced hail like that before. A little bit of pea size or something like that, but nothing like that. I was not going out of the garage, you know.
Both the middle and high schools in Warsaw are closed today due to the storm damage. Tens of thousands are still powerless today in Pennsylvania. Last night's storms proving fatal in State College. A 22-year-old man was killed after being electrocuted near a utility pole. Police say the victim was attempting to put out a brush fire when he came in contact with an active electric current. New York may have a budget, but there are still many issues needing resolved. Among them, the formula needed for doling out school aid, as well as how New York will settle the staffing crisis at state prisons. Governor Hochul says that 3-week prison guard strike earlier this year cost New York $700 million.
We're still paying for in extraordinary numbers every month because thousands of workers walked off their job.
Those workers walked off their job to protest working conditions inside state prisons. The governor fired thousands of corrections officers, leading to a staffing crisis across New York. 2 people are dead, including a child, after a 2-vehicle crash on Route 6 in Tioga County, Pennsylvania. A 66-year-old man and a 9-year-old boy were killed in the accident in Sullivan Township. 2 other children were airlifted to the hospital. One of the vehicles involved in this crash belonged to the Towanda Area School District. Cops say the driver of that school vehicle, for whatever reason, crossed the center line and struck a commercial vehicle coming in the other direction. The Real ID deadline is just 1 week away. 1 week from today, May 7th, a standard license will no longer be valid to fly within these United States. Reporter Chris Van Cleve.
In 30 states, fewer than 70% of eligible residents have a Real ID. In 17 states, the compliance rate is less than half.
Anyone 18 and up must have a Real ID, enhanced ID, or a passport to board a flight without delay. If you don't, you could be in for some long waits. You may be selected for extra screening time.
For passengers who don't have the Real ID, how much extra time will the screening take?
At least 30 minutes on top of the 2 hours that we ask passengers to show up at this time.
Airline industry analyst Henry Hartfeld predicting chaos at the airports next week.
If you don't have to travel May 7th, May 8th, or May 9th, I would encourage you not to.
To get Real ID, you'll need to make an appointment with your local DMV, and that can take weeks. When you do get that appointment, make sure you bring with you your birth certificate, social security card, proof of residency, and driver's license. Nearly a dozen players with the West Hill High School boys lacrosse team in Syracuse, New York, are facing charges today for their alleged roles in a hazing incident. Onondaga County District Attorney Bill Fitzpatrick.
This is a joint decision by myself and the sheriff. We are prosecuting this case. If you were involved in this, you have 48 hours to turn yourself into the sheriff's department.
Fitzpatrick says the criminal case comes from a prank some of the older players played on younger players. Last week, one younger player was tied up and put in the trunk of a car. That prank now has cost the team the rest of the season. Boys lacrosse now canceled at West Hill High in Syracuse. It's a sure sign spring has sprung. The world-famous Maid of the Mist begins operations tomorrow at Niagara Falls. We get a preview from Family Life's Dee Haley.
The season is scheduled to run from May 1st through November 2nd. The Maid of the Mist features 2 all-electric, zero-emission vessels that were the first of their kind in North America when they were placed into service in 2020. Tours depart every 30 minutes, Monday through Friday, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. on weekends. Hours of operation will be extended throughout the summer. Ticket information is available at maidofthemist.com. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
Thank you, Dee. A high school teacher from Central Pennsylvania has just been named the 2025 National Teacher of the Year. She's Ashley Crossan, and she teaches English at Mifflin County High School in Lewistown, PA.
I think that, especially at the high school level, students are trying to figure out who they are, and they need to see that from their teachers too. If we want them to figure out their identity, then we have to be ourselves as well, because they're going to learn through what they observe.
Crossan has been teaching for 14 years now and is also an advisor for the school journalism program. Ashley Crossan, your 2025 National Teacher of the Year. Way to go, Ashley. Sports is next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, we begin in the NBA playoffs. 3 teams had a chance to win their best-of-7 series and move on to the next round. 2 of them did, but the Knicks were not one of them. Detroit handed New York a 106-103 loss at Madison Square Garden to pull within 3-2 in the series. Cade Cunningham led the Pistons with 24 points. Tyrese Halliburton made a last-second layup in overtime to eliminate the Bucks from the playoffs, 119-118. The guard scored 26 for Indy. The defending champs aren't going anywhere but forward. They took down the Magic in Boston, 120-89. Celtics got a 35-point, 10-assist, 8-rebound performance from Jason Tatum. They await either the Knicks or the Pistons in the next round. The Denver Nuggets won a pivotal Game 5 against the Clippers, 131-115. Denver now up 3-2. On the ice, it took 2 overtimes before Carolina put away the Devils 5-4. The Canes are moving on to the second round, winning the series 4-1. Ottawa, Vegas, and Edmonton all grabbed 3-2 leads with victories. On to baseball, the Bronx Bombers at it again. Grisham, Judge, Rice, Bellinger all went deep in the first inning, and New York never looked back. 15-3 the final over the Orioles, and the Yankees hit 2 more home runs before that game was over. Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, and Starling Marte all went deep for the Mets. They defeated the D-backs 8-3. The Phillies scored the winning run on a wild pitch to edge the Nets 7-6. Pirates dropped a 9-0 decision to the Cubs. That is a look at sports.
All right, Randy, man, thank you very much. And there is much more ahead on today's Noon Report. Are empty store shelves on the way? We'll take a closer look. Power problems in Pennsylvania and smartphones, dumb people. Real answers with Chris Anderson after this.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. During the early days of internet debates, a lawyer coined the phrase Godwin's Law, named after himself, to describe how online discussions escalate and come unraveled. As an online discussion continues, he said, the probability of a reference or comparison to Hitler or Nazis approaches 1, end quote. In other words, when people run out of arguments, they resort to comparing their opponents with the most evil person imaginable. Godwin's Law has held in the decades since and now applies to political discourse and campus protest. A common trick the last few election cycles is to call anyone to the right of Barack Obama literally Hitler. And activists on college campuses have been quite successful in stifling debate without ever using arguments, but by simply referring to opponents as Nazis. Even so, Godwin may not have anticipated the day when someone who was just called a Nazi would quickly reply, "I'm okay with that." Since the middle of last century, Hitler has been considered the worst, and rightly so. Though plenty of Western academics were willing to overlook the atrocities of communists, Hitler, as historian Tom Holland has said, has always been the archetype of evil. Holland even argued that Hitler has come to replace Christ in the Western imagination as its moral center. Instead of Jesus as the acme of all that's good and right, Hitler is the definition of the ethical life only in reverse. Today, however, on the anniversary of Hitler's death, April 30, it is important to say again that Adolf Hitler was among the worst and perhaps the worst villain of all history. There's been a kind of reevaluation of the Nazis happening recently, which began on the fringes of online culture. It must be soundly rejected, especially now as even more people seem to doubt that the Holocaust happened or suggest that Hitler maybe was just misunderstood. What's behind the vibe shift for Hitler? Kanye West's swastika t-shirt campaign brought the conversation to pop culture, but what really made the difference is when an amateur historian went on two of the world's biggest podcasts and claimed that the Nazis didn't kill as many Jews as people say, or if they did, they didn't really mean to. He also claimed that Hitler rarely made anti-Semitic speeches, despite the overwhelming historical evidence to the contrary, and suggested that the hero status of Winston Churchill should be rethought, along with the so-called post-war consensus. The deadly reality of the Holocaust is well documented. The thousands of books that have been written about Hitler agree, from William Shirer's account as a journalist in Germany to the autobiographical work of Albert Speer, who was part of Hitler's inner circle. The same is true of N. Kershaw's massive 2-volume, highly detailed biography of Hitler, as well as Conrad Hayden and H.R. Knickerbocker, who both wrote before the war had even ended and before any so-called post-war consensus could emerge. He was the one primarily responsible for the most horrible war in all of human history, and is easily in the top 5 of all-time murderers, with tens of millions killed. There have been no new facts discovered about Hitler, but decades of skepticism, fueled by methodological doubt and untrustworthy institutions, have robbed our society of the ability to trust. People who think that nothing is true are the ones most susceptible to lies. A Christian worldview is committed to exposing error, but it also commits us to the side of what is true. That's why Christians should never become lost in cynicism. The best antidote for lies, as Paul prayed for the church at Philippi, is love, the kind that abounds in truth and in all discernment. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
All right, John, thank you very much. Outside we go next, Kevin Williams.
Here is your Family Life weather forecast. For this afternoon, a mix of sun and clouds, but turning out mostly sunny, much cooler. High temps 50s in New York, low to mid-60s in central and eastern Pennsylvania. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, chilly, 30s and low 40s overnight. Tomorrow, some sunshine, clouding up, late day, nighttime showers and thunder. Warmer, high temps, mid-60s to mid-70s. Some showers around Friday, mostly cloudy with high temperatures mid-60s to the middle 70s.
All right, great work at the Weather Center. Thank you, Kevin. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm Bob Price, and there's a lot to get to. Wednesday, April 30th. No school today in Warsaw, New York. After last night's powerful storms, the storms killed a man in State College, Pennsylvania. He got electrocuted after coming in contact with a utility pole. Tens of thousands are still powerless today in Pennsylvania. Cambria County hit especially hard. The deadline to get Real ID is now just 1 week away. NBC's Tom Costello.
400,000 passengers a day, about a fifth of the total number of passengers right now, do not have Real ID. Some states have done a great job of getting new Real IDs out to people, replacing old driver's licenses. Other states, not so much. But the bottom line, that deadline is fast approaching.
The deadline is next Wednesday, May 7th. Experts say getting an appointment at your local DMV can take weeks. You'll need several forms of identification when you do book that appointment, so make sure you take it with you when you go. For the first time in 3 years, the U.S. economy contracted during the first quarter. The gross domestic product down 0.3% from January to March. With his first 100 days now in the rear view mirror, President Trump is turning attention to Congress. He wants them to pass his agenda on tax cuts and spending priorities. Texas Congressman Chip Roy keeping a close eye on the bottom line.
There's a large constituency would like to see those taxes lowered, but at the end of the day, we got much bigger fish to fry. If we're going to extend tax cuts, then we better get busy doing the spending cuts. A lot of people say don't touch benefits, but they don't want to do the math.
Still, House Speaker Mike Johnson is confident that Congress will be able to approve the president's so-called big, beautiful spending bill.
We want to move this aggressively because it will stabilize the markets, it will be a turbo boost to the economy, and it will show the country that Republicans are serious, that they made the right choice.
The Speaker hopes to get the budget across the finish line by Memorial Day. We'll see if he can do it. President Trump, meantime, hosting business leaders at the White House today. Many of them are concerned the tariffs of late could lead to higher prices and supply chain problems. Amazon has canceled plans to list extra charges as a result of the Trump tariffs. Matt Piper has that story.
After White House blowback, Amazon says it won't display tariff costs next to online product listings. The company says it did consider it for its haul service, a recently launched low-cost storefront, but says it was never approved and will not happen. Earlier, the White House lashed out at the Jeff Bezos-owned company, calling it a hostile and political act.
Uncertainty over the tariff trade wars resulted in a reduction in container shipments from China to the U.S. Carter Evans reports from the largest port in the Western Hemisphere, the Port of L.A.
Almost half of the production at the Port of L.A. could disappear in the coming weeks if something with these tariffs don't change. So companies are just kind of in a wait-and-see mode right now, and they've essentially hit the pause button on all their shipments.
Turning our attention to the issue of illegal immigration, the U.S. Postal Service is now delivering for the president's deportation efforts. More on that from reporter Vicki Barker.
The law enforcement arm of the Postal Service has begun cooperating with the Department of Homeland Security Task Force seeking and deporting undocumented immigrants. The Washington Post calls that a new departure for the post office and one that dramatically broadens the scope of President Trump's mass deportation campaign.
Vicki Barker in Washington. We're learning more today about that $60 million fighter jet that fell off an aircraft carrier and into the Red Sea this week.
Sailors on the USS Harry S. Truman were using a tractor to tow the FA-18E Super Hornet jet into the hangar bay when they lost control of it. The plane's crew and the tractor's crew all jumped out before the $60 million jet fell overboard. It's been a rough few weeks for the Truman. In February, the carrier collided with a merchant vessel in the Mediterranean Sea.
Michael Wallace at CBS News. In grief-stricken Chatham, Illinois, the central part of the land of Lincoln, the search continues for the reason why a motorist slammed into a building hosting an after-school program that caused the deaths of 4 girls, ages 4 to 18. Ian Lee has the latest.
Community members are leaving stuffed animals and flowers in front of the plywood covering the gaping hole at the Why Not after-school camp in Chatham, Illinois. The center, 12 miles south of Springfield, was packed with children Monday afternoon when state police say a car left a road, crossed a field, and plowed through the building.
Ian Lee reporting measles cases are surging across the country, nearly 1,000 confirmed so far nationwide. The outbreak started in a Mennonite community in West Texas back in January.
This is a serious situation. This outbreak is the biggest we've seen in the last 25 years.
The CDC's Jonathan Yoder says the best way to prevent the measles is to get vaccinated. Since the Texas outbreak, 3 people have died, including 2 unvaccinated children. You're tuned into the Noon Report, a midweek edition, right here on Family Life.
Are we getting dumber? That's the topic today on Real Answers. It's a regular Wednesday feature here during the Family Life News Report. We talk about the issues that matter to families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Welcome back, Chris.
Good to be here, Mark.
Always good to have you. Well, we have a certain age. We know the exasperation of, say, walking into a room and having no clue what it is we came in there for. But this is something deeper, more wide-ranging and concerning. There's new data out that seems to indicate that regardless of age, human cognitive ability abilities seem to be trending downward. That's kind of scary.
It's not entirely surprising if you really look at the amount of time that we spend, and this goes back to what we've been talking about here, the past couple issues of Real Answers here.
Right.
The amount of time that has been spent online since really the internet really got cranking, and especially now with all these apps, it really has a proportionate increase to our decline. So it's not too hard to figure out what's going on here.
No, for sure. I coached some youth baseball back in the day. Even back then, and this was kind of around the beginning of smartphones really starting to show up. But I noticed that just in kids, just couldn't focus. I mean, baseball is a game where you just kind of got to stand there and pay attention, and they couldn't. They just can't. Some of that's just little kid stuff, but it was a trend too. Even before smartphones, watching TV, whatever, instant everything. They need instant everything and couldn't focus. And we're starting to see that all over the spectrum of society.
And if you look at what has happened to our education system as a whole in the United States, I mean, back in the day, let's say even only 2 generations ago, we were near the top, if not at the top, in terms of quality of education in the world. And now we're hovering right around 35 in the world. So there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about that. But like you were saying, you're coaching little kids, and especially nowadays, these kids are growing up with screens. They're growing up with instant this, instant that, instant. Everything is instant.
Yeah.
To the point where children are no longer expected out of necessity to have to learn to be patient and have to be able to focus for any length of time because everything is so instant.
It's just so pervasive. They see it in adults now. I guess that generation has grown up and they stay that way.
Well, adults, too, the numbers of adults that are claiming to have, we'll call it adult attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, those numbers are way up. As a mental health therapist, when I get a case of ADHD that is the real deal, boys, it stands right out. But when I get a lot of people coming in, a lot more than I would say the true cases, they're just simply spending way too much time on their computers, on their smartphones, using all these apps and playing all these games. Quite honestly, if you think about it, just because a computer or a smartphone can actually do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should be doing that. Yes, these things have a seemingly unlimited potential to quote-unquote make our lives easier, but are they really? Or are they just serving to whittle away at our mental acuity and our intelligence? And as a matter of fact, there's studies that are out now that are showing, that our attention span is dwindling down. Years ago, around the year 2000, it was about 13 seconds, and now it's like 3 to 5 seconds. It's having a major impact. But these aren't necessarily irreversible, It can be reversed.
That's the good news there. Yeah, our phones got smarter, and we didn't. You're listening to Real Answers. Mark Webster, along with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson, talking about the dumbing down of humanity, it seems. So let's turn to Scripture here. It certainly has a lot to say about patience and also about parenting and reining in some of these things.
Yeah, it really does. And, a lot of studies are saying, well, COVID, the lockdowns of COVID and this and that. Well, here's what I would want people to think about. When the Great Depression occurred back in the 1930s, and you want to talk about, I realize everybody's 401ks right now aren't looking fantastic, but if you want to think about it, this is not a Great Depression. We're still far better than what we were back then. In life, when you had to pack up your family and leave and go to an entirely different area of the country, not even knowing where you were going or what you were going to find when you got there, simply for survival, was far more disruptive. Now, and that's the generation, and the one after that, they were the ones that were quote-unquote the greatest generation. Isn't that interesting? So they had that level of disruption. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have instant access. But boy, they ended up being the greatest generation. Now, we need to go back and say, well, what were some of the things that they were doing that we aren't doing today? And take a look at some of this and understand that, yeah, we had COVID. Your kids were locked down for a while. Sure, they're a little bit behind, but you know what? They can get caught up. But we got to prioritize that. We got to turn those screens off. And in terms of sharpening our own mental acuity, here's some tips. Start doing some extra reading. The number of folks that actually read an entire book or a novel in any given year has dropped so much. If you're going to exercise your body, you got to exercise your mind. Same thing. Same principles apply. Turn the screens off. Get better sleep. Drink more water. Eat better. And then practice by reading books. start reading something that's light but of interest to you. If you can, avoid the screens, use printed material instead, and keep practicing that. And you might have to actually cut some things out permanently. I'm not saying turn off your phone forever. I'm not saying that, so don't panic. But what I am saying is be careful about allowing the phone and all the really cool things that your phone can do to dictate what you actually do. You need to be in control of it, not the technology itself.
Excellent advice, Chris. You've been listening to Real Answers. I'm Mark Webster, along with mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. Chris, thank you again.
Great being here.
All right. Do you control technology or does it control you? Great question today on Real Answers. You can hear it Wednesdays at noon. Also, you can subscribe, listen to, and share Real Answers, as well as all our original podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. The cold front that sparked the heavy thunderstorms that some of us saw yesterday afternoon and evening is now past, and cooler air has arrived, and calmer conditions the result. Our next weather maker, there's another front coming. It's going to bring some showers and rumbles late Thursday into Friday, although the severe weather threat does not look as high as with the previous front. For this afternoon, a mix of sun and clouds, but turning out mostly sunny, much cooler. High temps 50s in New York, low to mid-60s in central and eastern Pennsylvania. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, chilly, 30s and low 40s overnight. Tomorrow, some sunshine, clouding up, late day, nighttime showers and thunder. Warmer high temps, mid-60s to mid-70s. Some showers around Friday, mostly clouding with high temperatures mid-60s to the middle 70s.
All right, thank you, Kevin Williams at the Weather Center. And finally at noon today, don't touch the artwork. Curators at a Dutch museum say a painting worth over $56 million, yeah, that's $1 million, has just been damaged by an unsupervised child.
A spokesperson for the museum in Rotterdam says the 1960 abstract painting by American artist Mark Rothko has a number of visible scratches in the unvarnished paint layer after the child touched the lower part of the work. The identity of the child and the parents has not been released. In the past, the museum has billed visitors who damage artworks on display. Restoration experts have been brought in to repair the painting. I'm Michael Kastner.
Yeah, look, don't touch, especially at museums with $55 million paintings. Thank you, Michael. And that's our world. The world we live in. Wednesday, April 30th. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.